disgusted. I can't help but wonder what's happened to my companion. Are they lost or are they found? Have they counted the cost of going down? All the earthly principles they're gonna have to abandon. And they're the slow train coming. Well, I had to meet a woman down in Alabama. She was a wayward girl, but she sure was realistic. She said, boy, without a doubt, you're gonna put your message straight out. You could die down here and be just another accident statistic. All the falling off, controlling American soul. Don't look around, about to make you feel embarrassed. She's walking around like kids, making plans to choose the nose rings, deciding America's future from Amsterdam to Paris. But they're the and woman haters, masters of the bluff and masters of the proposition. But the enemy that I see wears a cloak of decency. All non-believers and man-stealers talking in the name of religion. But they're the slow train coming. Jordan on the guitar. Well, my baby went to Illinois with some fellas she could destroy. There was nothing I could do about it.
And after all, in California, for 10,000 years, our population was about 300,000. Now it's 38 million. We have more structures, more activity, more sparks, more combustible activity, and we got to gear up for it. And as the climate changes, this is going to be a radically different future.
He and his criminal friends should be arrested.
I don't care about economy. I don't care about liberty. But it sure grieves me till my loved one turns to POPULATED.
34 years ago to the day, You were on Meet the Press, and we couldn't actually find the tape for it, but we have something that you said about immigration, which I want to put up on the screen. You said, "I do believe that the Mexican American has been too invisible in California and throughout the Southwest. It is imperative that we in this country, and particularly in the Southwest, open our hearts and our minds to this culture, and that we try to accelerate the melting pot and the assimilation process so that we can live together in harmony." Here's Time magazine this week, and on the cover it is Yo Decido, which is that I'm going to decide, Hispanic Americans are going to decide who the next president is if you look at the percentage that they occupy of the voting bloc. And they are certainly not very happy with the Republican Party. Do you believe even more strongly today what you said 34 years ago?
Very much so. And I was one. I think I may be the only governor, but I know I'm the one who signed the Dream Act in California that will enable undocumented students who do well in high school to go to college, pay in-state tuition, and even get a scholarship. So I know there's a lot of controversy in that, but you can't round up 12 million people and ship them back across the border. That's a disaster. We have to certainly secure the border, but we need comprehensive immigration reform with a path to citizenship. And I think Obama would supports that, and I certainly do.
I can't trust any politician.
I do believe in a comprehensive immigration reform, the kind that was being considered a couple of years ago by both Republicans and Democrats. And I think there has to be, under proper conditions, a path to citizenship, and she doesn't agree with that.
What, but you're willing to make them legal?
I am willing to make them legal.
Well, what's the point? Why would you be against sanctuary cities and driver's licenses when you want to make them legal anyway?
You're a lying piece of garbage.
He and his criminal friends should be arrested.
I have campaigned against amnesty. I don't think it's right. And so I doubt very much if I would support that bill. It is a major problem, though. And the problem of immigration comes because of the welfare state in two ways. If somebody comes over here illegally, our laws and our courts, matter of fact, this was a court ruling, the court dictated that an illegal alien is qualified to get free medical care and free education. And that occurred some 25 years ago. So that doesn't discourage them from bringing their families, that encourages them. So the welfare state, actually, if you subsidize something, you get more of it. And that would be one of my first steps is I would take away all subsidies from illegal and legal aliens. You know, I just don't, well, matter of fact, I don't think the whole system should exist. So, I would not give amnesty, and I would change or clarify the 14th Amendment on birthright citizenship. I do not believe just walking across the border and having a baby should qualify the full rights of a citizen.
My name is Leon Kalankowitz. I am a wildlife biologist and environmental planner. I got a bachelor's degree at Virginia Tech. During that time, I worked quite a bit for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. From there, I went on to get my master's degree in environmental planning at the University of British Columbia in Vancouver, Canada. And from there on up to Alaska, where I spent the next 4 years working for the Alaska Department of Environmental Conservation and the Alaska Department of Fish and Game out in the wilderness. In the early 90s, I used to give a lot of talks in Southern California to Sierra Club and other environmental and conservation organizations. One of the things I always used to open my talks with was a discussion of population and just how important human population size was in the attributes, the environmental attributes of an area, how much space and resources there were left for wildlife and wilderness. What made me realize this was the 3-year stint I made as a Peace Corps volunteer in Central America, in the country of Honduras. I was living in a country trying to protect its resources under ever greater strains and stresses. At the same time, the country is staggering under the weight of so many people. Its classrooms would have 50 and 70 kids. They can't afford books for them. Economic growth was falling behind population growth. Even at that time, before I'd come back to the United States, I realized, boy, this is an unsustainable situation. Something isn't right about this. In the early 1970s, the journal Science published an article that introduced an equation called the IPAT equation. I is equal to PAT. That is, if you multiply the size of the population times level of affluence of that population, times the technology that delivers that given per capita consumption or affluence, you get a rough idea of what the environmental impact is going to be. That, for many of us in the population field, has been sort of our E is equal to MC squared equation. Through the 1960s into the 70s, the US population was still growing pretty quickly at that time, approximately 2.5 million people a year, 2 to 2.5 million people a year, which was of great concern to those of us who wanted to protect the environment and conserve natural resources in the United States. Meantime, the world population was growing on the order of 90 million a year. If you put it in terms of this IPAT equation I mentioned a few minutes ago, the impact of the American growth was much greater because of our much higher levels of per capita consumption and technology. That is, the average American would be consuming anywhere between 10 to 100 times as much as a person in a developing country, depending on what part of the world they were in. The United States, as a matter of fact, reached replacement level fertility, or a TFR, total fertility rate of 2.1 in 1973. We crossed that threshold. What that meant was that if we maintained neutrality in immigration, that is, emigration, people leaving the country, equaled immigration, people entering the country, you would have population stabilization or stability in the United States. What has happened since then? We have actually added another 100 million Americans. Most of that population growth, on the order of 2/3 to 3/4 of it, is driven by immigration right now in any given year. Roy Beck and I have done some studies together to try and quantify what the impact of these increasing numbers is, overall aggregate population growth on the country is. And we learned that about half of sprawl in the United States is due to population growth. Well, that's half of what most environmentalists and a lot of Americans would consider to be a major problem facing the country. The loss of open space, the loss of countryside, cities that never seem to stop growing. If you look at other things that are topical and timely nowadays, energy consumption, oil imports, greenhouse gas emissions, population, if anything, is an even greater factor. Virtually all of the increase in our greenhouse gas emissions, say from 1970 to the present, from 1990 to the present, any time frame you choose, is attributable to population growth. We are no longer increasing our per capita energy consumption. That has been stable or stagnant or actually been reduced, depending on what type of energy resource you look at, for 20 or 30 years now. If you look at oil imports, I can safely say that we wouldn't even need any oil from the very turbulent Middle East if it weren't for the 100 million people that we'd added since 1970. I see the immigration and even the population questions as part of a much larger quest for environmental and ecological sustainability in this country and on this planet. How we get from here to there is not an easy question to answer, but certainly having immigration levels that are 4 times that of historic ones are not a step in the right direction. One of the titles I see in the bookstore here is An Inconvenient Truth by Al Gore. An inconvenient truth that a lot of environmentalists seem to be unwilling to acknowledge is that it's population growth driving the increase in our greenhouse gas emissions. Whether or not environmentalists want to face up to it, immigration is part of that equation.
Sometimes Pete's so low down and disgusted, I can't help but wonder what's happened to my companion. Are they lost or are they found? Have they counted the cost of going down? All the earthly principles they're gonna have to abandon, and then the slow train, coming. Well, I had to be a woman down in Alabama. She was a wayward girl, but she sure was realistic. But she said, boy, without a doubt, you're gonna quit your message and straighten out. Or you could die down here and be just another accident statistic. future.